Hi everyone, and welcome to Quilt Stories. I'm Lisa Walton, and today I'm chatting with Maria Shell, who's in Alaska. And it's fascinating for me because I'm sitting here in Sydney, Australia in winter, but it's a nice winter's day, and Maria's up there in her cabin. So would you like to say hi and tell us about where you are, Maria?
Sure. So it's called a dry cabin, which means there's no running water or toilet or shower. We have an outhouse, and I actually have a shower that's in my wood shed. We're off the grid, and it's a little cabin. It was built in 1920. It's in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park, which is the largest wilderness preserve in the United States, and it butts up against a Canadian preserve. So it's actually, with the two lands touching each other, it's the largest designated wilderness area in the world. And we are lucky enough to have a little cabin here.
That sounds a really interesting place. I'm not so sure about the no running water and things, but
Yeah, it's not for everyone. I love it though. You know, today I rode my bike up. To get mail, we have a mail shack, and the mail comes twice a week via plane. And I ride my bike up to the mail shack and get my mail. And it's a beautiful sunny day today, so we have lots of solar power. So my iron is working, and I've had a good day in the studio, and I love it.
great. Sounds lovely. I'm going to switch over to the screen sharing so we can talk about your quilt.
All right.
And here we have a lovely photo of you and your quilt, which is called Bear Fence. Why is it called Bear Fence?
Because out here in McCarthy, we live across the street from an environmental science, art, and educational facility. And I'm a member of the board. It is an organization that's been around since the 1970s. And during the summer, when we have programs on, we are growing our own food, and we compost everything. So we have a compost pile with an electric bear fence around it. So my children, we have 3 boys, and I showed them the bear fence because we compost over there, and I explained to them it's electric, you can't touch it, but each and every one of them had to touch the bear fence and get shocked for real. Like, they all had to have that experience. And as I was making this quilt, it just reminded me of the bear fence and of that summer and all of the boys touching the bear fence.
I love that. This is an initial sketch, I presume?
Yes. So a lot of times I will sketch out an idea. And the idea for this quilt was basically, I've written a book, and it's called Improv Patchwork. And in it, it breaks down all these different sort of improv units that you can make. And I thought, well, you know, I've made a lot of quilts that have components in them, but I've never used my book to make a quilt. So I broke it down into, there's 4 different units in this quilt, and you'll see that it changed from the initial drawing. What I make, the sketch is, I don't have to follow it. It's just there as my initial idea. And I most often will deviate because for me, I want to get the best quilt. And if the best quilt is something different from what I sketched, then I'm always going to choose the best quilt. And whatever component from the quilt that was good but didn't make it into the final quilt, well, that can roll over into the next quilt.
So what we have here are your strips. So you've preordained, I assume, your color palette.
Yeah, so this is really just an example of one of my color palettes. And something I talk about when I teach is how to pull basically an 8 to 12 color palette. What I try to do is to represent the entire color wheel along with neutrals. And big thing really is, and it's the way I phrase it, is each color should hold its own. And by that I mean, no matter what color it's next to, it doesn't become absorbed into that other color. Now, some of the colors, I call them weak links. And if you look on the bottom row, you'd see this sort of dark forest green. And if you were to place it next to that gray that it's catty corner from, that would be a weak link, in that that forest green and that gray placed next to each other are not going to be very dynamic, and they're going to glom onto each other. So as I'm piecing, I'm never going to put those two together. Now, later on in the composition, they may end up next to each other at a point when I can't control it, but as long as I can control it, I'm going to. So these pieces, so this is the palette, and they were all cut up to do this, what we're looking at now, which is to stitch them into pairs. And as you can see, I'm always trying to pair them so that they're beautiful. Like a lot of people that teach improv will say, oh, just stitch it together. Just stitch it together. It doesn't matter, just stitch it together. If you do that, a lot of times the only way you can resolve your composition is by floating it on a neutral background. There's no way that you can put pattern on top of pattern, which is my favorite thing to do, if you haven't been controlling your color combinations from the very beginning. So this is just a big mess of them. So I will cut, like we saw that big, the whole color palette, and I cut them into chunks, then I go to the sewing machine and I pair them. And then this is another sort of trick of mine that I frequently find students are reluctant to do, and that is you stitch them together once and then you need to press. You don't get to stitch them to another set and then another set where you end up with all these seams that haven't been pressed. You really have to cut, stitch, press, and then I cut again because I shape everything, which I think we're going to look at a little slide that talks about that also. So this is me. I call these short row stripes, and that's what I was building with those units that you saw all cut up and then pieced. And a lot of times when I get a unit big enough to be put on the design wall, even though I know what I'm going to do with it, most likely in my quilt, but I will take those units and play around with them and photograph them as potential ideas for something that I might do in a different quilt. So I'm always like, I'm looking at the units as they're gonna go into a composition, but also what they can do with each other just on their own. So these are those, what I call short row stripes pieced together. And then I guess something else that I should point out here is that when I make the initial cut, so you can see that these are all probably 4 inches wide. What I normally do is I'll do a skinny cut, a fat cut, a medium cut. And by that, I mean, they'll be 4 inches by 1, 4 inches by 2, and 4 inches by 3. But then I also go in and I cut, I call it skinnying down. I cut some of them to be skinnier so that I am continuing to create a variation in the line. So all of the tan strips are not all 4 by 2 inches. When you look at a traditional quilt and it's a strip set and all of the strips are predictably the same length and width, your eye quickly understands what's happening and is often like, I'm done. You know, they're no longer, the eye and the brain are no longer stimulated. Whereas here, because like say, well, let's focus on the yellow. You look at the yellow and you start your eye moves around and you're like, those aren't all they're the same color, but they're not all the same width. And your eye thinks that's exciting. And it tells the brain, hey, brain, those yellows aren't all the same. And so then the brain engages. It's part of how I like to mess with things, is to make it vibrate and be interesting to look at. So every time I cut, stitch, press, and then I call it shaping. And that is making every unit look beautiful at every stage, as well as making some of, as we were talking about the yellow, some of the yellow skinnier. And that is just my pile of leftovers from shaping. So this is another sketch where there's a point where it's all got to fit together, which, you know, I do all this bit work and I have who knows how many seams in my quilts, and it becomes quite complicated in getting them to fit together and lay flat. So we've been looking at my short row strips, and I'm going to attach this elongated triangle shape onto them, and I don't want to lose a lot of the triangle shape. So I'm measuring things out. I always tell my students, I use a ruler, I don't use a ruler. So there are times when it's got to fit together. For example, if you look at the square in a square, I know what size it needs to be in the end. It doesn't matter what the other squares are on the inside. In fact, it's much more interesting and organic if they aren't all the same. So that's that. Those units are all built together. And if you start, your eye, at first it's like, okay, those are green and red triangles. Those are pretty cool looking. And then you start looking around and you see that some of them are smaller and some of them are significantly smaller. If you go down to the bottom middle, the one in the middle on the bottom, on the left side, you'll see there's one little triangle that is a little teeny stubby thing. And that is me finagling those so they'll fit together to be, I need this unit to be a certain size, but I don't care what anything's doing on the inside of that. I mean, I do care, I'm controlling everything, but I don't have a need to have them all be exactly the same. In fact, I would prefer if they're not.
Yeah, and it makes it vibrate more.
So those are the squares in a square. Same thing going on, that I needed to make them a certain size. And I'm pretty happy with how this is all coming together. I like the palette. This is one palette, but these short row stripes have the complete palette within them, whereas the green and red, which are in the palette, have been isolated to form those triangle units. The same thing with the blue. Those are in the original palette, but they don't necessarily look like it. I, at some point, decided that I was going to do this checkerboard, which in my book, I call it a continuous 9-patch, which is basically, if you know how to make a 9-patch, it's the same process, but instead of stopping at a 9-patch, you keep adding on to it. I realized when I got this on the design wall, it was looking pretty static. And this is a quilt where I was on deadline, which is, I'm always on deadline, but I realized I was heavily relying on my ruler and that I don't like to do that. I'm someone that will I want to control everything. So the ruler is a form of controlling things, but something made all with the ruler is not nearly as interesting as something made more organically. So I'm always having to sort that dialogue with myself. And this checkerboard was static, and I was really disappointed in how it was looking, and I knew it was about the fact that it was all ruler based. I thought about it and I realized I needed to cut into that. So I think so there's another, you can see it's static and it's got good graphic quality, but it's not what it could be. I mean, it's gonna get a lot better, but I had to do this, which was hard. Cut into things and it's like, oh no, is it gonna work? But I did it, and then I inserted some more and I made them rectangles instead of squares. So this has the original in it, but I don't know how, I couldn't recreate it for you. I'm not exactly sure how I got there, other than I cut into it and I added, and it's much more dynamic, a lot more exciting to look at.
So this is all pieced and stitched together and quilted.
This photo is taken by my photographer, Chris Aaron, who does for almost 15 years. It's good. Yeah, it took a while in the beginning because quilts are tricky to photograph because you want that balance of, for me anyway, I want to keep that graphic quality, but the thread work, which is a huge component of what we do, you also want that to be visible. So this is the back side of my quilt. And I don't know, probably about 10 years ago, because I've always sort of done this tight type of quilting, but I had used prints or other fabrics that didn't really highlight the quilting. So eventually I settled on using what are called cross weaves. Some of the brand names that people may know would be Shot Cotton by Kay Fawcett, or Pepper Corey has a brand of Shot Cottons cross weaves also. So basically what a cross weave is that the warp and the weft can be dramatically different threads, or they can be very similar, but they're not the same. And it gives the fabric a bit of a sheen. And I have found that it works magic with my quilting. So there's something about that Shot Cotton that allows my quilting to look really beautiful. And at the same time, it hides mistakes in a way that just a solid, flat, say, Kona cotton wouldn't do the same thing. And that's another close-up. And that is the full quilt with that black edging on it is a facing, which is a garment technique that many art quilters have adopted or modified for their own purposes. And I love it because it gives that clean edge around the final composition in a way that a binding becomes a component of the final composition because it's a thin line that goes around your quilt. And I really like that clean edge that is very much like a painting. I don't frame or mount my quilts, but I do like them to have that clean edge that a facing provides.
Yeah, I'm a facing person as well. They just don't need that frame, do they?
No. And it's interesting for me, I can tell it's like 2009 when I made there are a couple of quilts that I have that are really, they've have a really good show record and they're in collections, but they've got that binding, and it really was a date, when I went from binding to no binding. This is the quilt, and it's called Bear Fence.
It really vibrates. Since you mentioned the electric fence, I can see it. It's really cool. I've got three. Well, two don't look very happy, but one looks happy.
We used to go on this annual camping trip with a bunch of families. 4th of July weekend. I like this photo of them because it's very indicative of their personality. So they're whittling sticks right now. And I think Trip, who is the Star Wars guy with the frown on his face, he probably wasn't allowed to whittle because he's too little. And then the middle one obviously is, attempting to slit his own throat or whatever. And then the oldest one has got that "wasn't me" t-shirt on. Anyway, this is around the age they were when they decided that they had to electrocute themselves with the fence.
And now
this is them this year. The middle son, Ozzy, who's also the middle one in the other photo, graduated from high school. And actually the oldest one, Fletcher, who's on the left in the photo, he graduated from college. And the youngest one with my sunglasses on is a 16. But we had this, it was very special actually, because neither of them got to graduate in the way that they would have if COVID wasn't going on. But one of the moms had this great idea. We had a socially distanced, super small little outdoor graduation, and that's a photo from that event. So it was really nice that Fletch was home and we all got to go to that.
Here is a copy of your book, which has been out for a couple of years now. Very popular, I believe.
It is sort of a manual for how to make these different units, several of which were in that Bear Fence quilt. So it's not a book that's going to tell you how to step-by-step make one of my quilts, but it is going to empower you to make units that you can then make your own quilts. For example, the quilt on the front here, I don't have instructions for how you cut each strip and sew them together, but if you read the book, you could figure out how to make your version of this. And that's what I'm interested in, is empowering people to be their own quilters.
So you're in your little cabin.
Yeah.
And are you doing any online classes or online lectures? I
am starting. And if anyone's interested, they can get a hold of me through my website.
All the details, all Maria's links are below in the description area. Please check them out. It's been lovely to chat to you, and now I'm all inspired to go and cut up some fabric, which is, I'm always inspired to cut up fabric. I've really enjoyed listening to your thought processes. I think it's fascinating how different quilters work. you have a style of your own. You're also part of the Cloth in Common group that I am part of. And
Yes.
we're currently working on our latest piece. I find it really interesting that we have 12 quilters from all over the world, and we all come up with completely different ideas. So if you haven't checked out the Cloth in Common site, please do, and you'll see my quilts and Maria's quilts and another 10 very talented artists as well. And so I'd like to thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your time up in your little cabin with no electricity and running water and things. And
we have power. We just don't, because we get our power from the sun. And we do have lights in here, but I haven't turned them on all summer. COVID has slowed us all down, and this is even slower. And I think there's something to be said for slowing down.
I agree. I think when we do recover from this time in our lives, I think we are all going to be very different people. I'm actually quite enjoying that slowing down as well. So we'll see what happens. Let's hope that it doesn't take too long to happen.
But yeah, I think we're going to be different, and I think hopefully we'll be a better world. You know, I hope it'll all be worth it if some good things come out of it in the end.
I'm sure they will.
But we are lucky as quilters that we have quilting, right? I mean,
yes. And when we have this community, and thank goodness for the internet. And I hope everyone's really enjoyed this insight into Maria's Alaskan wilderness hideaway. And if you have enjoyed it, please click the subscribe button below. It's just in the corner. And also a thumbs up would be really good as well, so that we can, thank you, so that I'm inspired to make more of these videos, because I'm really enjoying them. It's my sort of COVID therapy, I guess. But I know that the feedback that I'm getting is that people are really enjoying getting to know these amazing quilters. So thank you so much, Maria. And I look forward to seeing your next work in our Cloth in Common challenge. Bye.
Bye, Lisa.